thank you, and thank you all for being here. It's only fitting, I think, that the poets close out the literary festival and bring us home. We have 4 incredible poets here, and because I want you all to hear as much of their poetry as possible, I'm going to say very, very little indeed. I'll introduce each one of them as they're about to go on, and we'll start with the wonderful Ahja Fox. Ahja Fox is the Poet Laureate of Aurora and a Colorado native who has editorial, hosting, and teaching experience. And as I said, that's all I'm going to say. Over to Ahja.
It is such an honor to be here at JLF. I'm going to just jump right into it, but I do want to say that hearing Jesse's speech changed the first poem I was going to read because I believe that this is your baby. So this is dedicated to my baby that I just had. She's 9 months. Backbone, a dedication. My baby, I see you, fearless and unmarked by the disappointments of my lifetime. I see your painter's fingers green and your hair still like a barn swallow's nest. What does it matter if I die happy? For you, I'll sink the moon and the sun so you can rise. I'll swallow 1,000 bees, slosh my excess skin to give you warm body, instinctual to bolster, boast you. Although broken, my back is yours to ride. From 9 kiss to assertive pull away, I'll be there. I'll be there in blood, my intestines thin, tight rope for you to cross along. In apparition, you will find me, my greatest love, in your first skinny yellow dress. Cognizance kiss blooms against the forehead once you are older. Thank you. All right. So aside from that poem, I have a couple others. This one is titled, To Be the Background. To be is to fade, to dwindle gray until a small blemish. Acute blue, gradient blob, aquamarine was mood gravitating. Red dress was the armor, the blood, indelicate, salacious for noise. 2 miles ahead are the wolves, their teeth are gleaming, thus the trees' tea and gossip of lost balloons. Their chimeria shimmers, blinks, then blooms ever so slightly. They evanesce into deadlight, calling it a new home. Contoured by the peril, the leg and the heel stand stoic, and the fingers find sleep in the cherry ripple of another planet. When the growls encroach like white lines of periphery, when the miasma lightly strokes itself into a blush that spots the sky, the background listens with its body, an emulous spectator. This is the only portrait of being it has ever known. Thank you. All right, this one's pretty short. It's called Lungs Loud and Ancient. I keep feeding off a grenade, its mighty rum shelter, this drop calling by fire, a chase, a body, red light singing another wonder. In this gun, a man, beautiful laughing, so alive I shake. I see him rain, cold melody till flesh echoes. I let him go, boy pieces, restless of tongue. Thank you. Save that one for the end. While viewing the head of Akrabina the younger, I hear there's beauty in stark violence. The reason for pain could be found between the girl's teeth, insoluble and needle-like in its sated shine. It was all in her head, the carnelian polymer like a fresh coat of summer heat. They say that is how the injury of a woman shines, a generous drop made gem in this forest that shakes a breath until the smalls of one's feet are fractured. Fractured are the ice rings around the nose bridge, the bones of her narrowed by storm. And this unearthing is only seasonal, like untethering rope is only compulsory, but all is habitual. a cup game rotation of body bag or bed, enjoying the flavor of marzipan, of mezzaline, the moon's tapering light, I was ultimately teased by the magic and the power of my own body, bloody but stoned. Thank you. Okay. Baptism. Remember kissing those knees soiled in May? Statues were pointing at bodies windswept as we sat idle at the door of a bone church. We cupped tomorrow in girlish hands, our intrepid hearts risen-soaked and bejeweled. Reincarnated fetish priests were dragging our generation by their strange throats. Cherry springs had rotted and became flesh-eating children, and that it was there that I promised you an edifice that would split blue, touch Centaurus, a prayer closet smolder. We ate the lake seeds, tongued the dirt, until those bodies were no longer heavy. Thank you. And I only have two more. This one I hold really near and dear because it is based off of a specific statue that is in the Denver Art Museum. Phlebotomy procedure in a museum of art and history after artist Pia Stodbommer's Max, Crow, and Scissors. Of course I find you, gypsum Rex, chalk-swallowed neophyte, in the corner of my eye, unplucked yet baited straight from the ceiling, with your patrilineal shears shrunk just above the knee. And I only imagine the glinting edge can grow smaller, silent, once you snip the pride piece that brands you stone, a work unbubbled by the matchstick I keep tucked in my purse. Because didn't our mothers make us this way? Small rooms of interrogation, calling the mirror to ourselves in another form. What would you think if I stuffed you, boy without feathers, boy without lineal blood retention? Don't think I know about the rhythmic black tap, tap, tap upon your head, the feathered physician, cognizant ventricular in its chisel and break of your body. A glass gaze lulled just past the blue, I wonder about times where time runs thinner, where bloodletting isn't disturbed. But isn't it disturbed when you and I hide below the surface of our skin, ready to deglove the next person who touches us? Many are heavy-handed in their shaping of a thing. I wish I could say I was different. Thank you. And this will be my last poem. Proverb 91, Black Girl Reclaims Magic. I got here by my blood, something closest to the water. What was a rock or a tree before I? My footprints decorate this land, befriend the smaller seed. This, yes, this, a shattering of a world growing quiet. Past to present voices, so busy with their work, have told me that I am the queen of all that breathes here, right outside my body, all within my chest. Never mind, I was always nature's taking. I got here by my blood. My arms a fortress enclosing the still water, an ever-changing photo only I can project. What a godhead, goddess I am in this fringe circle of green, always rich, wise, and beautiful, always settled back in a chair with a leaf tickling against my cheek. All my love, blood, and effort has gone off into being, just a sharp whistle that reverberates through all the spines of all things. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahja, thank you. From one poet laureate to another, we now move on to Bobby LeFebre. He is an award-winning poet, performer, and cultural worker, and in 2019, he was named Colorado's 8th Poet Laureate, making him the youngest and first person of color to be appointed to the position in its 100-year history. Over to you, Bobby.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all for sticking around. Give it up for yourselves. It's always an honor to read with Ahja, and I just met these wonderful poets. They gave us 12 minutes, so I put together a 12-minute medley that's going to sound like one long poem. They invite me to a thing where men in suits all look the same, and they twirl and clink wine glasses as the cheese sits next to the olives on plates too small to fill anything but image. Everyone is secretly starving, and they laugh at things that are not funny, and they talk about golf and last quarter's returns, and they ask me to read something that is joyful and festive and celebratory, something inspiring that will make people feel good about gathering, but 50 migrants just died in a truck at the border, and the Supreme Court is an active shooter, and the police filled another black man with 60 holes, and I am not a topical poet, but the elders have taught us that the job of an artist is to reflect the times. So I get on that stage and I do what I do the only way I know how, and when I am done, someone tells me that the position of Poet Laureate is supposed to be apolitical. And I say maybe it is, but I am not, and sometimes the only thing better than a standing ovation is a room full of silence. A mentor once told me that sometimes your job as an artist is to be invited somewhere and ensure they never invite you back. And if in this moment, this is all we have, let us fashion from it something marvelous. Let us drink from its mouth until we become intoxicated. Let us stumble into the euphoria and the ecstasy of the now. The mundane is an enemy of the magical, monotony a murderer of the mystical. Let our howling be holy. Exist with me, rabid and untamable. Let us activate imagination to build new things, to construct new hearts, because the world, beautiful and broken, is collapsing in on itself. I keep a map of the world hanging upon my wall. Its head is bowed, its heart is heavy. There's a stench that permeates the room. I caress its topography. Its gaping wounds transfer blood onto my trembling fingers. I ask the map, what shall I do with the sanguine ink you have bestowed upon me? The map replies, take it, this unending pain, and compose with it a song so beautiful that the masses might for a moment make a home of all I am mourning, might for a moment sit at the table and look into each other's eyes and tell the truth. So come, all of you, and gather around the table. Bring with you the heavy luggage society has unfairly packed for you, the bags overflowing with barriers you have somehow ingeniously figured out how to navigate. Or, if your bags are a bit less heavy or are filled to the brim with privilege passed down like an heirloom, bring them too. Do not fret if you feel your cup is empty or if your china is encrusted with gold, for today we'll treat this table as an equalizer. Today, honest conversation and selfless action will be the food that nourishes us. Before we sit, let us pass our stories around like bread. Take a piece for yourself, but always be conscientious. Ensure there is enough to go around, for some know there is not always enough to go around. Or maybe there's always been enough. Maybe in the back, where the food is prepared, there is a surplus of things tucked away from the grasp and eyes of the peering. Stockpiles of things, cannily sharing them all with moaning scarcity. Maybe the meal was designed this way, where some are intentionally invited to the helping, others intentionally left off the guest list, no seat pulled out or given up, no place setting bearing their name. And as they say, if you are not invited to the table, it is possible that you are on the menu. And those without seats, those tired of being consumed, have this collection of your ugly we have been saving for moments just like these, boxes filled with old bones and new blood, attics packed with epithets and mason jars full of scars, cedar chests stocked with broken treaties and the nooses tied around our forefathers' necks. We keep under our beds the sting of your water hoses and the no dogs, Negroes, or Mexican signs you once flew proudly like flags. Buried in lockboxes beneath our fruit trees is the barbed wire of your internment camps, the bars of the prisons you built salivating with us in mind. We have, next to the extra virgin Mary candles in our closets, the gods ripped from our grandmothers, the languages choked out of our throats, we store in file cabinets next to broken olive branches, the names of family and friends deported, the names of family and friends banned, and you wonder why we grimace when we taste your apple pie, why the sweetness you savor is too bitter for us to swallow. You wonder why we kneel when your flag is raised, why our bald fists still have to punch holes in your pretty blue sky. Because we know that what the machine hasn't already swallowed, it will most definitely be coming for. Tractors with growling bellies and flesh between their teeth. This disease that runs rabid through them. This unquenchable thirst for things that are not theirs. Your tables are not new to us. These things you made us fashion but refused us to sit at. Our hands and feet and hearts know them well. This perk of being the builder, this perk of baptizing the wood with your sweat. In your rearview mirror, you can see us coming for you, but we're not aiming for your head necessarily. We're aiming for the humanity that lives somewhere in the basement of your heart. Our very existence is ceremony, the struggle sewn into our being, the survival radiating from our resilience, this joy we make space for despite the sting. We are Xochipilli in the flesh, arte in flower, in song, the drumbeat of the ancestors sounds inside of us, cosmic cultura running through our veins. We are altars dressed in stars and struggle, marigolds slow dancing to the brevity of life. These stories of survival we spit are sacred. They travel upon the winds like copal. We are rascuachismo, race, fist, and familia. The fire of warriors burns in our blood. The strength of our mothers woven into our bones. You cannot colonize that which refuses to surrender. You cannot kill that which refuses to die. The man in Mexico City selling me tacos can smell that I'm not from around here. The R's rolling off my tongue stagger clumsy like a baby learning to walk. My verb tense confusion creates a car crash in the middle of our conversation. No eres mexicano, ¿verdad? He asks as he scoops al pastor into fresh corn tortillas. Sí, soy mexicano, pero de allá. With loaded reservation, I say, Mexican-American. With confused eyes, he asks, entonces, ¿por qué no hablas bien el español? Then why don't you speak fluent Spanish? And I want to tell him about the time my grandfather came home from school, purple and blue shiner glowing like watercolor paint upon his café con leche skin, blood drawn by a bully's fist running red down his nose, asking his mother in Spanish why she made him Mexican, and if he could change his names to something that rolled off the white kids' tongues a little bit easier, and why the fresh burritos he took for lunch couldn't be sandwiches on white bread instead, and why the teacher always slaps the back of his head when he talks to the other brown boys in the only language his grandfather prays in. And I want to tell him more about my parents who bound and gagged the Spanish language, holding it like a hostage in the trunk of their tongues, an attempt to spare us the degradation of the past. And I want to tell him more about the man standing in front of him, about the generational fight for dignity, about the freedom of rearming oneself with the language and culture of their past, how education and forgiveness can eradicate shame, how we are brothers separated by false borders, how they tried to teach us we have different blood running through the same veins, how cultural pride is a shield we have learned to yield as we walk through the world, how the eagle and the nopal are tattooed into my heart as they are his. But there's a long line of people behind me. My tacos would get cold, and my sentences would travel broken like a drunk man stealing home from a hollow night at the bar. So I simply answer him, es una historia largo. He laughs, correcting me. Larga. Es una larga historia. I smile and walk away. We gather here together in this sacred circle like we always have. Here, around this fire that has always burned, the same fire that lives in our bellies and makes an inferno of our hearts. This spirit we summon, this beauty we conjure, this inventiveness we invoke. What is a vessel but a carrier of the coveted? A transmitter of quintessence, a conduit of culture. Come and meet us at the place where ritual is given a body, where ceremony is given a face, where our existence transfigures into a song we warble in unison. For he who sharpens his imagination is a visionary. She who gives shape to intuition is a prophet. They who hone mortality beseech the immortal. Look at what we are building together. We, the masons of reimagining, the architects of metamorphosis, the repositories of our collective consciousness, blessed be the makers, the ones who set themselves ablaze willingly to warm the masses, the ones who traverse the unknown, giving life to the unseen. Join us as we turn ourselves inside out. Watch as we illuminate what kindles inside our bones, these places where we find and lose ourselves at the same time. These messages we devise with purpose, these aesthetics we mold from the supple clay of our minds. Join us in these holy places of abandon, these playgrounds of ingeniousness, these geneses of more inspired tomorrows. For who does not admire a flower unfolding? Who does not feel the warmth of the sun shining boldly upon their face? Whose feet do not move at the coaxing of the drum sound? Come and meet us at a new juncture where expression devoid of consciousness is merely decoration, where art is an insistent incubator for justice, where equity and access are an altar we decorate with the flowers of promise and purpose. For what is it to highlight the margins but an attempt to balance the scales? What is a raised fist but a war cry in the language of the purposely silenced? What is dissent but an innate aversion to the confines of the status quo? Art and culture is a communal land that does not know borders, a common language we are all born speaking fluently, a right that has been paraded around as a privilege for far too long. Come and help us rip the esoteric from the sky. Let our hands reach for the stars, grasp them, and share their tangible glow with anyone drawn to their light. And here, we will all shine and wander together. Here, we will eradicate all of the man-made barriers we impose upon one another. This beautiful burden we carry, this responsibility tethered to our pens, paint, pirouettes, percussion, and performance. This work, this digging, these hands unearthing the truth, this joy, this beauty, this struggle, these songs, these testaments, these heirlooms, these markers of humanity that remind us that we are here, that we are alive, that we always have been, and that we always will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Over now to Andrew Schelling. Andrew Schelling is a poet and a translator. He teaches at the Jack Kerouac School at Naropa University, and he has published 25 books, including Love and the Turning Seasons, India's Poetry of Spiritual and Erotic Longing. All the way to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Bobby and Ahja, for your readings. Terrific. I'm just going to read some translations this evening. I'm going to, from two different poets from India. First, a gentleman named Bhartrhari, probably 7th century, very little known about him. I will not read any of the original Sanskrit, and that will save those of you who know the language much better than me from having to contain your mirth. Bhartrhari. Once I was bit by a snake, scaly and muscular. It stretched, coiled, gleamed like a blue water lily. I never saw its eyes. Physicians with miracle cures seemed everywhere when it struck. But if I'm struck by a woman's soft eyes, no surgeon can help. Herbs don't, ointments don't. And by the same poet, a very different tone. Take a skull from a village or holy grove, fit its inner rim with white cloth. On the outskirts of town, head towards the black, thick smoke where old-time Brahmins perform the sacrifice. Each door you pass, ask for handouts for your empty belly. It's a proud man's life, better than going every day to whine to your relatives. If I crush gravel hard enough, I might extract sesame oil. Thirsty enough, I could draw water out of a desert mirage. Someday I will travel far and locate the legendary rabbit horn. But to appease the mind of a fool, that's beyond me. Keep silent, they call you stupid. Speak to the moment precisely, they say indiscreet or too wordy. Stand close to those you serve, impulsive. Keep to yourself, timid. Calm they call cowardice, decisive acts poor breeding. The dharma of serving the state is a dark mystery. We yogins can't understand it. At night, a mouse chewed a hole in a wicker basket. It dropped into the jaws of a snake crammed inside, weak with hunger. Restored by the creature's flesh, the snake slipped free through the little hole. Stay within yourself. Fate acts. No one can see what makes a person rise or fall. Bhartrhari also apparently moved from nation to nation or country to country or area to area, region to region. He says, I wandered rough, dirty countries and got nothing in return. Gave up family ties, clan, property to perform thankless labor for the rich. Ruining my pride, I ate in other men's courtyards, stooped over like a fucking crow. Greed, you just widened your jaws and fed on my ugly karma, not even gratified now. And one more by Bhartrhari. Nothing whatever has substance. In the end, things are tasteless, even poisonous. They cradle our delusions. Nonetheless, in this world, great merit consists in caring for others. And in samsara, the great ecstasy comes when your indigo-eyed lover opens her petals at night. Now I'm going to move both forward and backwards. I'm going to come up to 15th century India and read translations of Mirabai. So that's forward, and I'm saying backwards too because these are much older translations of mine, done back in 1990s. Most of you probably know of Mirabai. Legend says a Rajasthani princess, 15th century, Rajasthan, Gujarat. Her language is sort of mix of, medieval Hindi, Rajasthani, Gujarati. She sings regularly to a mysterious being she calls Shyam, the Dark One, possibly a name for Krishna, but possibly more than that too. The Dark One. He has stained me. The color of raven, he's stained me, beating a clay two-headed drum at both ends like a nautch girl I dance before sadhus. Back in town, I'm called crazy, drunkard, a love slut. They incited the prince who ordered me poisoned, but I drained the cup without missing a step. Mira's lord is the true prince. He stained her the color of raven. Birth after birth, she is his. O mind, praise the lotus feet that don't perish. Consider all things on heaven and earth and their doom. Go off with pilgrims, undertake fasts, wrangle for wisdom, trek to Benares to die, what's the use? Arrogant body just withers. Phenomenal world is a coy parakeet that flies off at dusk. Why throw a hermit robe over your shoulders? Yellow rag yogins are also bewildered, caught every time in the birth snare. Dark One, take this girl for your servant, then cut the cords and set her free. The Dark One's love stain is on her. Other ornaments Mira sees as mere glitter. A mark on her forehead, a bracelet, some prayer beads. Beyond that, she wears only her conduct. Makeup is worthless when you've gotten truth from a teacher. Oh, the Dark One has stained me with love, and for that some revile me, others give honor. I simply wander the road of the sadhus, lost in my songs. Never stealing, injuring no one. Who can discredit me? Do you think I'd step down from an elephant to ride on the haunch of an ass? And I'll close with another Mirabai song, poem, which is a, sort of an early morning raga. And the tradition is often that you end the evening with an early morning raga, so this is a coda. Wake up, my lover of women. Wake up, my amorous flute player. Night has fled, it is dawn, wake up. Shutters bang open in house after house. Hear the bracelets chiming together as gopis strain at their butter churns. Wake up, it is dawn, gods and men throng through the doorways. Cow-herding boys, their little hands stuffed with bread and butter, drive cattle to pasture. Wake up, Mira says, wake up. The flute player will save you, but you must come seeking refuge. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And by extension, thank you, Bhartrihari and Mirabai. We have closing us out Arundhathi Subramaniam, who is a leading Indian poet and writer on the sacred. She's the author of 13 books of poetry and prose, most recently, Love Without a Story. She also won the Sahitya Akademi Award in 2020. Arundhathi, take it away.
I just want to thank first all these wonderful poets, really. It's an honor to read with them. And I'd like to read 4 poems. I know time is running out. 4 poems, and I made a somewhat hasty choice as I listened to them. So some of these poems are in response to what we've heard, but this is for the fact that we were actually talking about diversity at the very start, and there's now a reason to celebrate, I think, the very diverse voices we've heard in the course of this very festival and will continue to hear in years to come. This is a poem called Mitti. Mitti in Hindi means mud. And it was actually a commissioned poem. I was asked to write a poem by a newspaper incorporating the word. And it was a strange prospect. I was resistant initially, thinking I had to write a kind of soil of my motherland kind of poem. But I'm glad I stayed with the word because it led me to places that I hadn't quite expected. Mitti. As a child, I ate mud. It tasted of grit and peat and wild churning and something else that I could never quite find a name for. Later, I became a moon gazer, always squinting through windows, believing that freedom was aerial, until I figured that the moon was a likely mud gazer, longing for the thick sludge of gravity, the promiscuous thrill of touch, the license to make, to break, to remake. And so I uncovered the old role of poets, to be messengers between moon and mud. And I began to uncover the many languages of earth that have nothing to do with nations and atlases, and everything to do with the ways of earwigs, the pilgrim trail of roots, the great longing of life to hold and be held, and the irrepressible human love of naming. Ooze, maya, manure, humus, dirt, silt, mold, loam, soil, slush, clay, shit, mann, matope, baro, tinen, ni, luto, fango, all have their place, I found, in the democracy of tongues. None superior, none untranslatable, all reminders of the anthem of muck, of which we are made. Except when June clouds capsize over an Arabian sea, and a sleeping city awakens to an ache so singular that for just a moment it could have no name. Other than that, where sound meets sense, and a slop of matter meets a slick, lunatic wetness, smitty. Just that. Nothing else will do. This is really in response to Andrew's translations of Meera. It's a poem from my previous book, and it's about the notion that I discussed yesterday, the idea of the Ishta Devta, or the personal God, which to my mind is one of the great contributions, really, of Indian spiritual culture to the world. The idea that you have 330 million gods and goddesses to choose from, and if you don't find one, you invent one. And if you don't want to invent one, you toss the whole lot out and still continue on your journey to freedom. How some Hindus find their personal gods. It's about learning to trust the tug that draws you to some shadowed alcove, undisturbed by footfall or butter lamps, a blue, dark coolness, where you find him waiting patiently, that perfect minor deity, shy, crumbly, oven fresh, just a little wry, content to play a cameo in everyone's life, but your own. A God who looks like he could understand errors in translation, blizzards on the screen, gaps in memory, lapses in attention, who might even learn by rote the fury, the wheeze, the pali, the pigeon, the gnashing mixer grinder, the awkward Remington stutter of your heart, who could make them his own. After that, you can settle for none other. And this is one rant of a poem which I enjoy reading. It's addressed to a Welsh critic, but it could just as well be addressed to any of the voices back home in India and elsewhere in the world, voices that give us dogmatic definitions, voices that give us recipes, blueprints, formulae, and tell us how to be ourselves, how to belong to a particular faith, gender, how to be traditional, how to be modern, or in this case, to the Welsh critic who doesn't find me identifiably Indian. You believe you know me, wide-eyed Inglit type, from a sun-scalded colony, reading my Keats, or is it yours, while my country detonates on your television screen? You imagine you've cracked my deepest fantasy. Oh, to be in an Edwardian vicarage, living out my dharma with every sip of dandelion tea and dreams of the weekend jumble sale. You may have a point. I know nothing about silly mid-offs. I stammer through my Tamil, and I long for a nirvana that is hermetic, odor-free, bottled in Switzerland, money back guaranteed. This business about language, how much of it is mine? How much yours? How much from the mind? How much from the gut? How much is too little? How much too much? How much from the salon? How much from the slum? How I say verisimilitude? How I say brahadaranyaka? How I say varaparam? It's all yours to measure. The pathology of my breath, the halitosis of gender, my homogenized plosives about as rustic as a mouth-freshened global village. Arbiter of identity, remake me as you will. Write me a new alphabet of danger, a new patois to match the chola bronze of my skin. Teach me how to come of age in a literature you've bark-scratched into scripture. Smear my consonants with cow dung and turmeric and godhuli. Pity me, sweating, rancid, on the other side of the counter. Stamp my papers, lease me a new anxiety, grant me a visa to the country of my birth. Teach me how to belong the way you do on every page of world history. And it feels right to end with a mellow poem. So I don't know how many of you have felt this way. Growing up, I thought of my parents as just the backdrop to my life. And it took me, there was one disconcerting moment when I turned and I realized that these were full-fledged, flesh and blood human beings. This is that moment of discovery. When landscape becomes woman. I was 8 when I looked through a keyhole and saw my mother in the drawing room in her hibiscus silk sari, her fingers slender around a glass of iced cola. And I grew suddenly shy for not having seen her before. I knew her well, of course. Serene undulation of blue malmal, wrist serrated by thin gold bangle, the gentle convexity of mole on upper right arm, and her high arched feet. Better than I knew myself. And I knew her voice like running water, ice cubes in cola. But through the keyhole at the grown-up party, she was no longer geography. She seemed to know just how to incline her neck, just when to sip her swirly drink, and she understood the language of lacquered nails and baritone voices and words like emergency. I could have watched her all night. And that's how I discovered that keyholes always reveal more than doorways, that a chink in the wall is all you need to tumble into a parallel universe, that mothers are women. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 2, please. Hi. Before we all disperse into the night, I would ask you to all remain on the stage like a collection of immortals. I think that would be rather fitting. And I'd like to invite William Dalrymple up to say a few closing remarks before we all get off stage. Bill is the one of the founding directors of the Jaipur Literature Festival in Jaipur, and a pretty serious historian. And anyway, go for it. The podium's working.
Okay.
If you want to use that.
First of all, thank you, poets, for that. Everything we tried to do in that festival was in that session. All that brilliance and energy and genius. Thank you so much. Fantastic ending, all of you. We've had some thank yous already, but just to round up again, thank you most of all, City of Boulder, the Boulder Public Library for hosting us here, the Boulder Arts Commission, BluOne Ink, and other partners for supporting us, the advisory board, the US Literary Advisors, the venue managers, the volunteers, and all of you for coming. We need your support from everyone to sustain the festival. If you love us, if you want us back here, particularly if you happen to own some enormous business, please sponsor us and support us and help us bring this back another year. But in the meantime, thank you everyone that has helped, everyone that has performed, and we hope to be back here next year. Thank you.